EVO.
Welcome back to The Devil Within. This is another episode of our continuing re-release of Season 1 in support of the MGM Plus docuseries Let the Devil In. So we're up to Episode 6, another Robert Frost banger, The Road Not Taken. Let's jump in. Okay, a lot of times in this podcast you'll hear me say, no, really, this is my favorite poem. Okay, this could be probably my all-time favorite Robert Frost poem. I know I said that about Stopping by Woods. I'll probably say it about other things later on, but right now it's this one. Okay, and there's a specific reason for it. Very rarely do you get an artist, a writer, a poet that leaves a little note and says, hey, this is what I meant with this. This is what I was going for with this. And it's not that Frost exactly did that, but he left some breadcrumbs when it comes to this poem. Okay. In the traditional reading, in the traditional understanding of the poem, it's about a traveler who is walking through the woods and comes to a fork in the road and doesn't know where he is or where he's going and has to make a decision. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. So long I stood. So he puts you right there. Here I am, I'm in the woods, I'm walking along. Which way am I going to go? And then he waxes very poetic about looking at each one just exactly the same, then took the other just as fair. Okay, says those words, then took the other just as fair. And he says, really weren't about the same. And in the final stanza he writes, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, again, a traditional understanding of that poem, of which I'm one of those traditional readers of it, it's a parable. It's a poetic cautionary tale about don't take the easy way out. Take the road less traveled. You'll be a better person at the end because it'll build character, it'll build grit, it'll build resilience. It's like the story of Hercules, okay? Hey, he's half God, and they're like, yo, you want the easy road? Here it is. And it's filled with wine, women, and song and leads you right to the steps of Mount Olympus. Go for it. Or there's this way, and you can't even see beyond the first turn in the road, and then it's fraught with danger and difficulties, and there's high highs and low lows, and you're going to have to fight, and you're going to bleed, and there's going to be loss and heartbreak, but at the end, you'll be a better person. And it was the human half of Hercules that chose the harder path, and that's the lesson of it. Take the hard road, learn your lessons, you'll be a better person. Okay. That's what's generally ascribed to The Road Not Taken. And it's a wonderful and beautiful and worthy interpretation of the poem. But then if you really read it, it's super confusing. And during, I think it was a commencement address sometime in like the 70s or 60s, a student asked him about that, about The Road Not Taken, and how it had inspired her along this path of doing what's right rather than doing what's easy. And he cautioned her, and it was an incredible moment. He said, be careful. All he said was, that's a very tricky poem. It's a very tricky poem is what he said. And so when I read the transcript of that conversation, because it's not on film anywhere or even audio recorded, I went, that's really strange for a writer to caution someone against how they're interpreting something. That means that he's super probably proud of the piece and wants people to dig a little bit deeper into the poem. And you don't have to dig that deep. Right in the beginning, he says, by the end of the second stanza, that other travelers like him had worn both of these paths about the same. He's saying they're the same. That at that point, there is no road not taken in the beginning of the poem. Okay. And then forget all the other stuff. Don't forget it, but you don't need it to the point that I'm making. You get to the end, and now picture him. It's not ages and ages hence. He's still the traveler. It's moments later after he made a decision which way to go. And he's just He's a young dude. He's alone in the woods, alone with his thoughts, just walking along. After that moment where he tried to manufacture some drama about which way to go. But then he's honest. He goes, they were both worn the same. And then he says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages from now, way in the future, as an old man, I'm going to be like sitting in a chair around a fire, surrounded by my grandkids, and I'm just going to go, two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. He's fabricating a lie, basically, that he's going to be telling people years from now to create his own legend. And that makes the poem so fucking cool, just on a different level, that it's not about someone taking the harder path to become a better person. It's someone lying that they took the harder path, and that's what's led to all my imagined success ages and ages from now. It's amazing. And I fucking love that when that realization about what the poem ostensibly is actually about, when that hit me, I loved it. But still, despite all of that, the reason that I chose that title for this episode of the podcast is to align with the more traditional understanding of the poem. Because if you're familiar with episode 6, The Road Not Taken, I put myself in Tommy's shoes on his first alleged trip to Cross Castle out of Clinton Road, where he witnessed a satanic cult doing their thing. And there's a moment when you're going down Clinton Road where you peel off to go to Hanks Pond to get to the ruins. And much like the guy did in the poem, I imagined, because no one was there but Tommy and his friend, I imagined a moment where he could have quite literally taken a different path and not gone that way, and that would have changed the entire course of the next few weeks and ultimately the rest of his life. So when you hear that part of the podcast, which I'll play later, you'll understand. But that's why this poem jumped out at me, why it aligned really well with the content of this podcast. So, The Road Not Taken. On December 27th, 1982, the body of Gary Smith was discovered stuffed between the mattress and box spring of a bed in a small motel room in Bergen County, New Jersey. The body had been poisoned and then, inexplicably, strangled. According to federal investigators, Mr. Smith was a small-time mafioso with two known associates who were more heavily connected to the New Jersey mob, Daniel Deppner and Richard Kuklinski. That second name there, Kuklinski, you may recognize, although he's better known as the Iceman, the notorious Mafia killer for hire who by this time had been an active hitman in the game for over 25 years. The three men, Kuklinski, Deppner, and Smith, were partners in a car theft ring, which they operated outside of normal Mafia supervision, which meant there was no support from the family, but there was also no one to answer to. So if Kuklinski determined that someone needed to get whacked, he just did it. No permission needed, no toes to worry about stepping on. So when he decided that Smith could no longer be trusted, he and Deppner laced Smith's hamburger with cyanide one day and waited so they could watch him die. It took longer than Kuklinski thought it would, so he had Deppner strangle Smith with a lamp cord in the motel room where they were having lunch. When the wheelman they hired had car trouble, they figured that since they couldn't transport the body to a suitable dumping ground, they should just conceal the body in the bed and get the hell out of there. Barely 5 months later, a cyclist making his way down a beautiful, if desolate, stretch of road just off the Hamburg Turnpike noticed a large turkey vulture just a few yards into the woods. Closer inspection revealed that the vulture was feasting on the partially concealed body of Daniel Deppner, the other former associate of the Iceman. Apparently, Kuklinski determined that Deppner's questionable loyalty outweighed his utility, and an additional personnel change was needed. Kuklinski had always enjoyed his drives into the woods of North Jersey to take his family horseback riding in a small town called West Milford. He particularly enjoyed his time surrounded by the majesty of nature as he made his way along Clinton Road. He would often smile, not at the antics of his young children playing in the backseat of his Cadillac, but because of how proud he was of himself for having discovered the perfect spot to dump a body. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. Kuklinski was eventually arrested as the result of a multi-agency undercover sting operation. Once convicted, jailed, and thoroughly convinced that he would never again be a free man, he spoke openly about his career as a hitman. He also betrayed the locations of several of his victims, while also taking credit for crimes that had gone unsolved. Included among these was Daniel Deppner. When it was revealed that the body in the woods off Clinton Road was in fact a victim of the most prolific Mafia hitman of all time, it caused a morbid fascination with that lonely stretch of asphalt and reignited interest in Cross Castle, ghost stories, and of course, the monster in the woods. But that's not all. The news of the mafioso buried in the forest also happened to immediately precede the unanticipated rise in the practice of satanic worship in the area. And as we all now understand, the one thing a coven of occultists needs more than anything is a nice, isolated forest. And so the case could be made that if not for Kuklinski finding the woods off Clinton Road a suitable area to dispose of Deppner's body, a whole generation of kids from Jefferson may not have even known about the strange stories, the ghostly encounters, and the castle ruins so close to their hometown. Further, if that section of wilderness hadn't been on national news described as perfectly remote and eerily quiet, then perhaps it wouldn't have caught the fancy of weekend warrior Satanists looking for exactly such a place. Then maybe, just maybe, a young boy named Tommy Sullivan could have been able to avoid his terrible fate. But it wasn't to be. Interest in Clinton Road had been reignited, and it was being visited and explored by a growing number of Satan worshippers, as well as local high school kids looking for a good scare or a secluded place to make out. However, of all the newcomers to the woods, only one arrived with an ancient knowledge and a secret purpose. Tommy Sullivan didn't know it, but he had two major forces working against him that December night, the night of his second visit to Clinton Road. And those forces were the skeptical mind of an academic and the innocent heart of the young. But before we fully investigate what happened in December and ultimately January, we have to understand the events that led up to it, beginning with Thanksgiving. We can now look at the whole story armed fully with the information required to reach a possible conclusion that considers all the evidence, connects all the dots, and hopefully answers all the questions. The nature of investigative science reveals that the most elegant answer, the more perfect explanation, is the one which relies on the least amount of assumptions, no matter how extraordinary the results happen to be. This with what we call a cold open, which is, a little story that really has nothing to do content-wise with the larger story that we're telling, but it has some tangential connection to what's going on. It's just the weirdness of where I grew up. One of the most prolific mob hitmen of all time used basically our backyard as a dumping ground for bodies. So Kuklinski, the Iceman, great movie about the Iceman, is out there, and a lot of the stuff that happened in that weird, macabre kind of criminal, murderous kind of sense, a lot of us were shielded from by our parents. Like, I didn't know about Kuklinski when I was a kid growing up. I didn't learn about all of this stuff till I was later in my teens and my 20s, And then there was one thing that happened when I was in high school that stands out, that was just like, you just got to shake your head and be like, well, I guess that's North Jersey for you. There's a reason that The Sopranos took place in North Jersey. Everybody that I grew up with, when the opening credits of that show is basically the drive from Newark Airport to North Jersey, to the area where I grew up. I'm not saying that I knew any gangsters. I didn't know anybody that was mobbed up. To my knowledge, no one in town was like that at all. But my senior year in high school, all right, so what happened was there was a guy in New York, a gangster, who turned state's evidence and decides that he's going to, like, he literally knew where all the bodies were buried. He was that guy, okay? So he turned states and he starts just confessing everything. And one of the bodies, I guess he was either the hitman or he was the wheelman or whatever, he just knew where everything was in Jefferson on the Milton side. And it was buried beneath the foundation of a house in Jefferson. And so the FBI comes in, the family that lived there had to move out. They had to break through the foundation in the garage, and like 20 feet under the house, there was this guy, the murder victim, rolled up in a rug, like how mafioso is that? And they got the guy that did it. And they got the trigger man and, went to trial and they got him. So that was a very direct connection to the North Jersey mob when I was 17 or 18. And it was funny. And I knew some kids that, because it was a fairly new construction, this house. And I knew some kids that they were older than me that used to go and drink and like smoke cigarettes in these houses when they were being built, when it was just like the frame and the foundation and it was just like a cool place to hang out. Listen, this was before everyone had video games and before everyone had phones and there wasn't a lot to do. So that was considered to be exciting. Hey, let's go hang out in a partially built house just because it's, different scenery. It's the 80s for you. Thanksgiving 1987. Let's remember briefly how Tommy Sullivan was thought of in late November.
Tommy was just a normal kid. I mean, he was our paper boy. I mean, for somebody who was going to commit a satanic murder, I mean, they were at 5 o'clock mass at St. Thomas that night.
Yeah. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. Family seemed to be a nice enough family. I'm going to call it your typical all-American family. Parents seemed normal. Kids seemed absolutely normal. He had a younger brother, if I remember correctly. And so, again, nothing would ever jump out at you if you're driving by the house that you would think, oh, boy, something weird or abnormal. Not at all. In fact, I think I remember they were even members of our church, which is St. Thomas the Apostle Church. So, again, everything appeared to be the all-American family, just like
Tommy actually went to Reverend Brown, which is the Catholic school in Sparta, the town next door. They just seemed like a normal family.
Pretty normal kid. Catholic school. All area wrestler, if I remember correctly. Well liked. Was definitely not on anybody's radar that this kid would do something as horrific as he did and then go and kill himself the way he did.
It's important to hear those words again because they're true. Tommy was those things. A good kid, thoughtful, pious, focused, and responsible. But his first step toward oblivion was about to present itself. So then in the episode, we get into this review of where Tommy was at this time in our story, where he was, where we believe he was emotionally, where he was with his friendship with who we called Lance in the podcast. Now, again, I hinted at this a couple of episodes ago. We're 98% sure we know who Lance is. But again, I'm not comfortable disclosing that. There are people, friends of mine, who know who he is. So if anybody in J-Town is really hungry for that knowledge, just call me or email me or ask other people that you know that I'm friends with. And they know. And the reason I don't want to say it is because he died. He died young, a long time ago. But there are siblings or parents or friends that are still alive. And when we tried to contact those people to talk for the television show, we got really emphatic no's. And by emphatic, I mean an email, go fuck yourself. We're not saying anything to anybody. and you should be ashamed of yourself. So, that was heard. I get it. And that wasn't the only time that I got responses like that, or we as a production got responses like that. Fully understand, and I get it. So that's why I'm reluctant to share who Lance was. But the mystery has been solved to a high degree of certainty. So, you'll also notice in this episode that a lot of the story is what I think is most likely to have occurred. We obviously don't know exactly what happened out at Clinton Road. We don't even know 1,000% that Tommy was there. From his writings and from hearsay from other people, again, we can be relatively certain that he was there. What did he see there? What did he do there? Again, there's hints and clues from his writings and from his drawings where you can make a determination. Now, again, I'm not trying to cop out here and say, hey, I'm not a journalist, right? I'm a storyteller. But it's true. Not a journalist. I don't have those same ethical standards where I'm going to corroborate everything with 3 sources. And again, not a cop-out, but I really didn't think that this story from almost 40 years ago was going to find an audience like it did. And I'm still super proud of it. I stand by everything. Can I prove all of this in the later half of the episodes? Of course not. Of course not. I was just trying to tell a story, to get to a very specific point in the storytelling in episode 8, which is coming up, that I'll get to. I wanted to get to one specific point where I could kind of plant a flag for me emotionally and for me personally to put this story to bed in my own fucking brain. Okay. It was like therapy, me doing this. And I've said that before. And so that's why I engage in as much conjecture as I am doing in these later episodes. So I hope that makes sense. And if you disagree, I totally understand. I get it. I read all those comments. I read all of the emails. I respond to the ones that I can. Not with an apology, just with an explanation. So that's where we're at with this. In the next episode, we'll get into one of the most interesting aspects of it for me, which is how shocked the whole town was when they found out where Tommy heard about Satan and how powerful Satan was. It was from the church. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that kind of, for me, that super interesting alleged black mass that Tommy witnessed. And again, we'll get into how much of this is hearsay, how much of it is based on Tommy's writings, how much of it is based on fact that I heard from the cops. Because honestly, at the end of the day, where most of the people involved in this are dead, it's tough to get the full story out. And that's what's so confounding and frustrating about the entirety of the Tommy Sullivan case, is the stunning lack of proof and evidence where you could officially put the story to bed. So that's in part 2 of The Road Not Taken, next episode of The Devil Within. So thanks for listening to The Devil Within. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate you sharing with a friend. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate and review the show. Even the smallest engagement with the algorithm helps more people discover the show, so I would appreciate your help. And don't forget, all episodes of Let the Devil In on MGM Plus are available to binge. Check it out. I can't thank you guys enough for the success that the show is enjoying. So thanks for joining me on The Devil Within. We'll see you next time.
The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your host, Branden Morgan.